national professional speaker. I am an international TV producer, and I'm a soft skills mastermind. And I have been overcoming trauma since the day I was born. My mother stereotyped me as a threat the day I was born. She tried to kill me twice. After the attempts to kill me physically failed, she spent the rest of my childhood doing her best to kill me mentally and emotionally. My father loved me, but my narcissistic mother abused everyone in the family. So he really loved her. And he really, really loved her. And so it was hard on him to be treated the way she treated him. He would go off to his job, come home, and drink 3 quarts of beer at night to bury his feelings. He couldn't keep them buried all the time, of course. So he would occasionally go into these rages that could last hours or days. And in one of those rages, he broke my older sister's arm. So I was afraid of him. I knew he loved me because he told me I was his favorite child. Something parents shouldn't do, but it saved my sanity. And so as a child, I had to develop soft skills to make connections with people outside of my family so that I could have some sense of positivity in my life. And I created, took positive control in small spaces. For the first small spaces I took positive control in were my ears and my mouth. I listened to positive words I could trust. I spoke positive words others could trust, and I spoke positive words to myself. Those were my first small space successes. But I was able to create some connections outside of my family. I don't know how, because I don't remember how, but my first second grade teacher, she got married and moved away in the middle of the year, was the first adult to make me feel safe. She was the first adult I felt safe with. When then she moved away. So I lost that person who made me feel safe. Then when I was 11 years old, I said something to a principal. I don't remember what, but whatever I said, she liked a lot because she started having me come to her office for conversations. Now, how many children do you think enjoy going to the principal's office? I loved it. I remember sitting across the desk from her, having these wonderful conversations. I remember sunlight streaming through the window. I remember laughing. It was just wonderful. That was my first small space success to attract unimagined success. Because of those conversations, I have always felt equal to any person in any room. I have never felt anything close to the imposter syndrome. And imagine having that kind of confidence to go throughout life. I can approach anyone because I know I'm equal to them. That
Paula,
was
let me ask you a question in regards to that. The
sure.
reason why is because you said so much, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the parents.
Yes.
You had your situation with your mother.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us have an issue either with our father, our mother, or a parental figure,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it leads to so many pain points as an adult. And before we move forward from that, we need to understand, okay, why did this happen to me? Right? And maybe you experience this as a child. Sometimes the child will think, why me? What did
Mm-hmm.
I do wrong? Did I upset them? Did I disappoint them? Am I a bad kid? Describe to us some of the thoughts that you went through when you were experiencing this type of treatment from your mother in regards to the trauma.
I had no idea why she was treating me the way she did. I just was focused on figuring out how to survive my next interaction with her. I didn't know why she tried to kill me until I was 34 years old, and the brother who was born after me told me. I was my mother's second daughter instead of her first son. He told me I was supposed to be the son. And over time, I realized that she had been raised to believe that she could prove herself a worthy woman only as the mother of a son. And it turns out she was in the same position I was in. Her parents had a baby boy first who died in infancy. The next child was my mother's older sister, my Aunt Terry, and then my mother, who was supposed to be a son. So she got similar treatment. I don't know if my grandmother tried to kill my mother, but my grandmother was paranoid schizophrenic, and she threatened her husband, my grandfather, with a butcher knife. He took it seriously enough that he left the family. And my mother and her older sister were left alone with my paranoid schizophrenic grandmother. So my mother didn't get nurtured from her mother, so she didn't know how to nurture her own children.
Did you think that she took her experiences and indirectly or directly made it your experience?
I think I think indirectly. She was very good at hiding things from herself. As after my father died, they were 16 years apart in age, so he was a lot older. So he died. She was a widow for about 9 years, and then she got married again. And she started telling people about how she had been a good mother. She had been a good mother. Well, you're not a good mother if you try to kill your baby. So she had convinced herself that whatever was in her mind about killing her baby could not possibly be true because she was a good mother. So she was very good at hiding things from herself. Any treatment she put to me from her childhood would have been an indirect thought. It wouldn't have been direct thought in her mind.
Well, we look at mothers as the epitome of nurturing.
We do.
And right? And many people
Right.
can't fathom a mother saying, I don't want to be a mother anymore. Let me end the existence of my child, especially a mother that has gone through something similar. You would either think they have what we'd call like a toxic situation, right? You're either going to fight, you're going to freeze, or you're going to flight, right?
Right. Right.
It seems she wasn't able to resolve it for whatever her reasons,
She wasn't.
but she took that energy and was able to pass it down in a lot of people's ways, what they would call generational trauma, which is from
Generational
one,
trauma. Right.
right, one generation to the next to you.
Right.
As you were able to identify that, what was your state of mind when you realized, wait a minute, my mother went through this same thing. How can she do it to me?
I didn't know how she could do it to me. It took me a while to figure out she was a narcissist, which means nobody else matters, of course. And I even passed down some of it. To survive my childhood, to survive living with the woman who tried to murder me twice, I had to separate my experiences into physical, mental, and emotional clues. I couldn't put them all together and say, Mom tried to kill me. In fact, I was a baby for both incidents, but researchers have found that babies as young as 3 months can form visual memories of trauma. We don't have words in baby brains, but we can create pictures. And I had a picture in my mind from the second murder attempt that lasted until I was able to put all those clues together and say, Mom did try to kill me. I was 42 years old when that happened. So it took me a while. And up until then, whenever I felt overwhelming, I was always stressed with all these clues about having murder memories. So when I felt the normal stress of life, I sometimes felt overwhelmed. And when I felt overwhelmed, I screamed at my daughter. She wouldn't bring friends home out of fear that I would scream at them. So it continued, not as bad, but it was traumatic for her. I was able to stop it while she was still a teenager, which is good. But it took her a while to believe that I was never going to scream at her again. So it was 3 generations.
When did you realize you're doing that, and when did you want to start fixing it?
Well, I moved to my parents' house. First, I moved in. My husband died in our house. I moved into my in-laws' house. We were living near them. And then a month later, I moved out back to my parents' house, where I stayed for a year and a half. Moved back to my in-laws' house. And then when my daughter was 2.5, my husband died when she was 8 months old. When she was 2.5, we moved into our own place. And so I was alone with the responsibility of my daughter for the first time. And that's when I started screaming. And I immediately hated myself for screaming. But I didn't know how to stop it. I hated the screaming, but I didn't know how to stop it. And because people don't think mothers could possibly kill their children, part of me knew that talking about it wouldn't help. And as I got older and closer to putting all the clues together, I knew that if I did start talking about it, nobody in my family would believe me. And that's what happened. Nobody in my family believed me because my mother is so convincing. I have no contact with any family member on either side of my family, not even my father's side of the family. The only person who stayed in touch with me after I decided to walk away from my mother and then my siblings because they believed her was my Aunt Terry, my mother's older sister, who knew what my mother was capable of. She's the only one who stayed in touch until she
When
died.
you look at the only person, when you think about the only person that you're able to maintain contact with in your family was your aunt,
Right.
and when she passed away, how did
Yeah.
that feel that that was the last connection to your family that you have?
Well, it was bad. I think I feel similar to survivors of the Holocaust who lost entire families. I understand losing an entire family because I did. Their families died. I walked away. That's the major difference. But I don't have family support. I don't have families to spend holidays with. Luckily, my daughter lives near me, so I can do holidays with her and I see my grandchildren. But I don't have any contact. And my mother was so successful at stereotyping me. She taught everyone to ignore what I said and discount what I did. This was behind her belief that she was a good mother. She taught everybody to ignore what I said and discount what I did in case I ever started talking about it. She was so good at it that as we became adults, my siblings treated me like a trespasser in their lives. And to convince my mother that I really wanted nothing to do with her ever again for the rest of my life, I told me to take me out of her will. For the time that my daughter and I, my baby daughter and I, were living with my parents after my husband died, she took 3/4 of my Social Security income as room and board and put it into a savings account for European trips. That's what my mother was like. And money was more important than anything else. So I said, take me out of her will. But to prove to herself that she was a good mother, she kept me in her will and loved to trust. She was so good at stereotyping me to my siblings that when I found out I was in the trust, my executor brother, the God, one of my brother-in-laws called him the God because of the way my mother treated him. He didn't give me any of the details trust fund beneficiaries are supposed to have by law. They didn't even treat me equally in terms of the trust fund. I didn't get the details until I threatened to sue. That's what my mother did to our family and to my relationships with my siblings.
I find sometimes in the family dynamic, right? You love them, you hate them, everything in between.
Right,
It seems in general, a lot of people think that it doesn't matter what your family does to you, you're always supposed to love them.
right,
But if you were to take some of the behavior that certain family members do to you and you would put that behavior in a friend or an acquaintance or a stranger on the street, you would have zero tolerance for
right,
it,
right,
right? And it seems
right,
like people seem to want to easily forgive something. Was you know how your cousin is, you know how your mom is, you know how your dad is, but it's not the it's the behavior
right. It's
that
the
is wrong, right?
right,
As well as when it's someone close to you, the standard is that much higher,
right,
right?
right.
Would you agree?
I agree. I agree. And people would say to me, but she's your mother. I said, but she doesn't. I would say she doesn't act like my mother. My life would be better if she were not in my life. And my life is better since I walked away from my family. It's a big sore in my life, but my life is better because I